Welcome back, folks. A glaring light in my eye here. This session's a little different. It's not a normal standing at the podium kind of thing. This is going to be kind of a fireside chat. Again, I'm David Turner from the FIDO Alliance, and with me right now is John Poirier, who's lead director from CVS. And it's going to be kind of a Q&A chat type of thing. So the title is The Forgotten, how we all started with the contact center, then forgot to secure it properly. You know, to me, the forgotten sounds like somebody who got left behind because of COVID, but I don't think that's what you're talking about. So explain maybe what you mean by the forgotten, John.
Yeah, so when I was really originally thinking about this, I was thinking about what everybody else is doing here at the conference and all the different ways that we go about getting somebody's identity and then going through the authentication process. And no matter what the solution, it seemed like all of the fallbacks were going back to the contact center. When this doesn't work, it's going to send you back to the contact center. So my original thought was, okay, you're going to go back to the contact center, but we all started with contact centers years ago, and what have we done to secure those along the way? So this isn't really a training session. This is more of an awareness session that
Sure.
Bring awareness to the contact center, and what are we going to do there? How are we going to secure the contact center and make it as secure as all the other things, the web and mobile stuff that we're doing today?
So, it makes me think of a couple of questions like, what's the goal of going through there? What might someone be chasing after if they want to go through the contact center? Like, what's the honeypot, if you will?
Well, that's another great question. So you have to understand where your company is at in the journey. So what are you securing? If you're securing anything, you have something to secure, right? So what they say yesterday, that passwords were invented in 1961. So there was a reason we put passwords in front of something, because you didn't want people to easily get access to those things. So you have to figure out what your company is securing. How valuable is that thing? And along that journey, there's all kinds of regulations and rules and everything. So understanding where you're at is really important so that you understand what exactly you're protecting. It's the risk factor that we're looking at.
Sure. Now, it seems to me that the scope of, the target can be broad. We hear people's bank accounts being, cleaned out and identities taken over, but it even affects, smaller things, sometimes something a little more personal, a little closer to home.
Right. So I actually, I was accepted as a speaker in January, and this just happened to land in my lap last week. We don't even have the clicker, do we?
Oh,
the clicker?
sorry, here it is.
So last week I did have a
green
personal
button.
experience with this. Everybody's got their security journey, right? Your password journey, and we all have different levels of passwords. Right? I know we're all guilty of, I've got that one easy password, and that one easy password is probably used over and over and over. So last week, kids are on fall break, and I get this email, and I look up. I'm like, who ordered a Jersey Mike sub? I'm like, not me, not me. I'm like, wait a minute. This is in Jacksonville, Florida. So we...
Do you live in Jacksonville?
I live in Phoenix. So
okay.
nobody had ordered that sandwich, and so I got the email, and I'm like, okay, well, that was very nice of them to send me the email. So I called the store, and I said, hey, listen, apparently Aaron has gotten into my account. Aaron should be there in the next couple minutes to pick up this sandwich. Will you please let him know that the owner of this account did not order this sandwich? And she says, yeah, no problem. Let me get your phone number. She got my phone number and called me back about 15 minutes later and said, listen, that guy did come in. He was looking for that sandwich. I had taken it off the shelf, and he said, I ordered this for my cousin, and walked out the store. She says, I am 100% sure that he hacked into your account, and she says, I'm going to put the points back. I'll call tech support. What would you like me to, would you like me to create you a new account, or would you like me to put him in your old account? I said, I changed my old account password, and go ahead and put him back in the old account. But I took this as an opportunity to challenge our team. And I took that password, and I had them put it through the tools, and literally within 5 minutes, a couple members of our team came back and said, hey, can I share my screen with you? I said, sure. And I said, if you show me any of my passwords, I'll tell you that that's the password. And they absolutely had my regular password and my more secure password.
Yeah, it's secure.
Yeah, it was great customer service from Jersey Mike's, and a good lesson for me that maybe that's not the greatest way to do things. So.
What I like about this example, I remember you telling me about it before, is that it really does highlight to people that it isn't just, you can't just say, oh, nobody's going to ever try and hack me because I don't have $1 million in the bank. It's like, no, sometimes it's just easy to get this stuff, and they'll use it to, get themselves a free sub if they can.
Right.
So it seems that with the contact centers, these are people. It's not like giving a password to a computer, so it looks like it feels like there's going to be a lot of social engineering type attack vectors there. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that's where we fall in line from a CVS Health perspective. I like to tell people we do three things, right? We sell bubble gum, drugs, and insurance. And each of those has its own special role in the world. But if we're trying to protect people's identity, and at the end of the day, there's people out there that are actually trying to steal your identity. And there's a lot of different methods. And I got to listen to a very, very interesting conversation a few months back where it was an actual person that had done this. And one of my colleagues was surprised. She was saying, I can't believe this guy quit doing this because he had a child. Not because it was wrong. It was because he didn't. This is just too risky of a job to. And he was describing the methodology that he went through. Actually, Feet in the Street, he called them, where they went and stole actual copies of applications, credit applications, right from small car dealerships, small banks. They'd physically steal the paper, and that started a profile. And that profile, he said he had 250 questions. And each of those questions needed an answer. And as soon as he felt like he was at a point where he could break into your credit account, he would then put a fake name so my Aaron Smith could jump on my credit account, right? So if I see Aaron Smith on my credit, I know the guy's working hard. And so once you get into the credit account and you can actually get the credit report, now you can see how well you've done. And the person I listened to said that if you weren't worth $20,000 to $40,000, it wasn't even worth it.
Unless you're buying a sub.
Unless you want a 16-inch sub really bad. So that $20,000 to $40,000 was just his mark, and he would build that profile. And so we have people calling into the contact center, and they might not be doing anything but social engineering us to get those questions answered, to hit that pot of gold so they can open up a credit card in my name so that they could go buy a bunch of stuff and start ruining my credit. Or whatever the game may be.
Yep.
I mean, there's probably plenty of them out there.
It's interesting because Vittorio Verducci from OAuth Okta yesterday was giving a presentation, and it was talking about types of attacks and bot attacks. And what was interesting is for creating, one was attacks with the intention is to create a fake account and fraudulent account. And financial services, I think, was the number one. But number two, right up there anyway, was utilities. And that seemed odd, but we were talking about it afterwards, and it seems that it's along the lines of what you were saying. Other organizations that depend on identity often use, say, show me your utility bill to prove that you live there. So if you get a fake utility account at a particular address, that's one of your starting documents for collecting all this bogus data. So clearly there are multiple paths to gathering this stuff. It's really interesting. So how do you approach that problem? How does a company think about that problem in terms of what can they do about it?
So one of the things you can do about it is, and I know my team will laugh when they hear this, but there's 3 pillars of authentication. And so you can't just satisfy one pillar. And the contact center has been inherently designed around the something you know. You've got the something you know, the something you have, and the something you are. And if you design everything around the something you know, it doesn't matter if you ask 2, 5, or 10. That spreadsheet's filled out. They know all the answers. You can assume that it's not something you know, it's something everyone knows. So you really can't use that as a factor of authentication any longer with any certainty to understand that, this is going to help me understand who this individual is. So from a contact center perspective, you have to start with something, right? So you always start with identity. And in a person-to-person interaction, I can show you my passport, I can show you my driver's license. You don't do that in a telephony call, in a telephone call. I'm not talking about mobile apps or mobile web.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking like this.
Yeah.
You're on the phone. What do you have to present to me to tell me who you are? And the only thing you really have is your caller ID. And if you're on your cell phone, that works well. But if you're not on your cell phone, that presents a challenge. So that's the first thing. It's called an ANI lookup, an automatic number identifier. You do the ANI lookup, and you can put that through some scrutiny and verify, do some checks and balances to make sure that you can trust that phone call. And that's the basis of everything that you do when it starts. We went through a long process where we've got it uniformly across the entire enterprise now, where the UCID, their Universal Call Identifier, comes across on every single call. So any call that comes into our call centers or infrastructure, if you will, is tagged with a unique number. So that helps us track that through the whole ecosystem, and that's really kind of unlocking a lot of the potential that we have behind these calls. So identity's first, and then the next thing is the authentication. And it was funny, I listened to a podcast a couple weeks ago where they talked about everybody pretty much at this conference is drawing the line at, we'll do the identity, we'll do the authentication, then we're done. We draw the line right there. We're not going to do the authorization. Right. And it's funny because that's exactly where we've drawn the line as well. We'll do the identity and the authentication. So in a phone setting, the only thing you really have is the ANI lookup and the identification that you've got. And the authentication is the next piece to the puzzle.
So I was going to ask about technology, and it seems like tying into phone number lookups and so on, and looking for patterns there is a key one. What about voice recognition? I know that, I don't remember, I think it was a credit card company, someone I was dealing with recently, and at the end of the transaction, whatever I was doing with them, service call, they said, hey, would you like to set up a voice print with us to help identify in case you need another phone or some such? Is that a viable approach?
I absolutely, and I think that's the future, honestly. I listened to the Web 3.0 conversation, I think it was yesterday, and we've been Web 0.0, right? Here's your MySpace account, here's your website, everybody go look at it, that was great. And then Web 2.0 is described as an interaction between the company and you, and then you could take those interactions and start extending those interactions to other people, your Facebooks and stuff like that. The problem there is that you don't own your identity. We haven't ever owned our identity. In this digital world, it's always owned by somebody else. So Google owns your identity, Facebook owns your identity, they own your data, they sell your data, all that. So the next wave is the 3.0, and that's going to be, I'm hoping anyways, that we own our identity again. It's a blockchain enabled, whatever that technology winds up being. We've been very dependent upon our devices, our phone, our face print, our fingerprint, and that's tied to your device. But your voice can't be tied down like that as easily. But I think in the Web 3.0 environment world, the up and coming, your voice is going to be the key to this. And it's very unique. Everybody's unique voice is measured. There's a couple of companies out there doing it fairly well. A lot of different characteristics and attributes that create your voice print. And I think that's, at least from a contact center perspective, that's going to be the solution. The implementation is going to be a challenge because of regulations and because we want to own that identity and those identifiers. Your voice print is a biometric, so there's going to be a challenge there, definitely.
I assume some privacy-related concerns and so on.
Absolutely.
So, you've clearly thought about this a great deal in the context of CVS. What do you have any specific tidbits, aphorisms maybe, that you want to share for other people who are, call centers are a big deal for a lot of organizations. How might you direct them? What would you ask them to think about first?
I think understanding where you're at in the food chain of hackers and social engineers, like what are you going to give up, right? And so depending on our bubble gum, insurance, drugs, each one of those has a different use case and different regulations, HIPAA regulations, PCI regulations. So really understanding where you sit in that architecture, if you will, and then understanding who calls in, right? So we have HIPAA regulations. If you're talking about the insurance side of the house, we have daughters that will call in for mothers, right? So there's use cases you really need to consider, and the voice can be thought of as a almost a key value pair, where you have to identify the person, and then you identify the voice is almost the password for that particular identity, and you have to understand that just because somebody's calling in doesn't mean that's the voice print that you have to use. I know my wife is guilty of it. She'll call in for her mother, and honestly, that's valid.
Yep.
But you have to really understand, what you're collecting as far as a voice print. Whether you want to do it with consent or without consent, there are laws. The Graham-Leach-Bliley Act allows you to ignore state law. I don't know. Ignore would be the best term, but you're protecting somebody's account, and as a financial institution, they're absolutely exempt from state law because of the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, and so you don't have to get consent. But when you do the consent model, there's a trust factor that becomes inherent, and having that trust and that trust relationship with your consumer is important in my opinion, and so taking that route is it needs to be thought through for every use case and what you're actually protecting and understanding your risk. But just the different use cases and the different reasons people are calling in and the reasons why you would want to use a voice biometric for your security.
Interesting. All right. Any last comments before we see if there's any questions in the audience? Or do you want to just see if anyone's got anything to ask? I don't see anything online. Anybody have any questions for John about call centers and
Hi, I've been following closely this whole deep fake technology, and you see the videos out there that this guy pretends to be Tom Cruise, and he sounds like Tom Cruise. What's your take on how the vendors that are doing this voice verification, how are they handling this deep fake technology? Because I think with AI, it's only going to get better and better. And is it good enough now, or will be soon good enough to actually impersonate a real client that then gets into your company?
To the human ear, it's there. You're not going to be able to talk and deep fake you right now. To a digitized computer or something that's listening in the background, something that would intercept, easily identifiable, just because it's digitized and it's the computer can tell way easier than the actual human ear. So the technology is already there. Could the technology advance to past the point that the maybe someday, but I'm hoping that the voice technology stays in front of the deepfake technology. But yeah, if I deepfaked you through a deepfake algorithm and kind of like a synthesizer where I talked into it and I was talking through the phone, yeah, you would never be. I could be anybody you want. I've seen examples of we had Obama three different portions of his life. Some very cool demos in that space.
Interesting. So we've got one from here through the app. What is the intersection of FIDO, given this is where we are, and the contact center security?
That's an excellent question. I don't know who asked that.
It doesn't. There's no name on it.
I'm guessing it's from my team, but
I'm giving you a softball.
Yeah. No, not a softball, because it's something that almost I don't want to say it bothered me, but I feel like a fish out of water here, because everybody's talking about web and mobile, and nobody's talking about the contact center. Right. I come from the contact center space. I was in the telephony world for over 10 years, and to bring that knowledge to our security team, I'm still the only person on the team that has that in-depth knowledge of where we're coming from a contact center. But again, my point earlier was we all are probably going to fall back on it sometime. When your password doesn't work, when something goes wrong with a pass key or whatever, you're calling the contact center. And I think I'm going to say it's a challenge. I want to put that out as a challenge to everybody at Authenticate and FIDO, is like, what are we going to do? How can we integrate a FIDO type solution into the contact center so that we can make this, integrate this biometric flawlessly and seamlessly and make the user experience with less friction as opposed to more.
Sure, sure. Good, thanks.
Hey, thank you. I also come from the contact center world, so let's
Right.
talk. One of the things I'm always surprised about, just in my personal experience, is like I'm not trying to social engineer a contact center agent when I call people, but often they're volunteering information about me back to myself that is either unnecessary for them to give me, or maybe they shouldn't be like giving me my entire address or email, even if that's something that they're using to verify me. So I'm curious from like CVS, how much information are you making available to the agents, and are you thinking about the amount of information that they see when they're on the phone with me about the people that they're talking to?
That's a great question, and not to dive into specifics, we're a very large company. There's a lot of different business units across the enterprise, and each enterprise business unit has different use cases and different things that they do. But we are trying to standardize that across. We have HIPAA validation screens, for instance, on the Aetna side, where we're really trying to understand who we're speaking with and not who we're speaking about. And that's a big delineation. But to your point, there is information on the screen, and I think that just comes down to agent training. There's a lot of agent training. There's a lot of traditional contact center things that we've changed over the years. One real quick example was a customer feedback solution that we implemented. It was revolutionary. We didn't ask the person at the beginning if they wanted to take a survey. We had the agent present it at the end, and then we hung up on them. And hanging up on your customer is never a good thing in a contact center world. But when we introduced the survey, thank you for calling. Please hang on the line. You'll be taken over to a survey right now. Why do I want to answer that question at the beginning of a call before I know how that interaction went? We did it at the end of the call. So it's those little things, right? So now we hang up. We're doing millions of feedback every year just based on that one change to the agent. So I think there's a lot of agent change that needs to happen, and security is obviously the approach that I'm taking. So, hi, Abby.
Hi, Abby.
Yeah, so I want to help you back on the FIDO question that you had. The role of the contact center, the voice center, will be not eliminated because you have passkey. End of the day, the account recovery process still require a tight coupling and binding between the account and the FIDO agent. What the passkey is doing, all what it's saying is someone with a credential have logged into to this account previously using this device. Does not mean it is the same person logging back in. And if you want higher assurance, you're going to go back to other means. The contact center will be one of those means. So, it's not a replacement. It's part of the whole security cycle, and it will be an integral component based on which company is doing and what the company is doing. Okay? So, kudos for you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. So we have another one here online. It says, you said voice is the future. What does that mean?
Another softball. Thank you. No, I think, like I said earlier, we're very dependent upon face print and fingerprint now, and those seem very secure, and those seem like a very well-educated approach to the next level. And I think voice is the next biometric that's going to be part of our future. You've got the IoT space that I think that the smart speaker space is going to be heavily utilized, and we're not able to give out HIPAA information over a smart speaker until those are HIPAA compliant, and we won't even allow it from a security perspective until we know that the person we're talking to is the person we're also talking about. So that voice verification has to be the right person. And then the authorization also has to come into that as well, because just because I authorize myself doesn't mean I'm able to talk about my 27-year-old son.
Right.
Or my 17-year-old, yes, I can talk about him this year. 18, I'm not going to be able to talk about his personal health information next year. So there's a lot of different use cases in our industry and other industries that you really have to take into consideration. But I think voice is the future. Decentralized voice, I think it's going to be key to Web 3.0 for authentication.
Yeah, the HIPAA compliance on the smart speakers is an interesting one. You want to prevent the scenario where I come over to your place and say, hey, Alexa, what medications is John taking?
Right.
Do we have any more questions here? Yep, please.
Not being familiar with like the telephony side of the world, is an anti-spoofable?
It is. Absolutely. And that is something that we definitely look at on the way in, whether that any is actively being spoofed. We are measuring a lot of characteristics out of the SIP header. So not to dive too deep into telephony, but there are some things that you can look at, and you have to make a trust decision on that phone call. Whether if you can't trust that phone call because you think it is actively spoofed, then everything else is just basically thrown out.
Well, we're out of time. Thank you very much, John. This has been
thank you.
excellent talk, and thank you everyone for coming.